We're joined by Dallas Congressman Pete Sessions, who campaigned for President George H.W. Bush during his bid for a Texas Senate seat back in 1970. And then the former president returned the favor for you in 2004. What do you remember most about the man?
Really his energetic excitement about what we were doing, selling the case, making sure people understood who I am, what I stand for. He's very big into making sure that he always put his best foot forward and tried to give a positive, thoughtful answer, not only to the circumstance, but about the future. He's a very much aim for the future leader for our country.
In 1970, he's making his second bid at a Senate seat. You're 15 years old at the time. What do you remember?
Well, what I remember is the excitement of being in a Democratic state with a Republican running to try and win.
People may not remember that. It was a long time ago. Texas was a solidly Democrat state.
Solid. So he was a firebrand for our party. As you remember, he graduated from Yale, came to Texas, made Texas his home. A little bit of wildcatter in him. You know, the opportunity to come down and come what was then West, that used to be the West, and put his name on what was an industry that was beginning at that time. Midland, Texas was and still is a long way from here because of the attributes of energy and what they were doing. And then he moved to Houston and became the solidified kind of leader for our party. But he has a great resume as a congressman, resume as a head of the Republican National Committee, resume as CIA director, resume as vice president, resume as president, and what he produced was a generation of ideas, not just the family, that has led our party and I think our state for a good period of time off a philosophy that he believed in, that was unlimited opportunity for a state that the country needed. The country, he believed, needed Texas and the kind of thinking that we would add to it.
You list so many of those accomplishments that he took care of in his 94 years on this earth. What will stand out most to you about the man, not the resume?
Well, I think what stands out most is that he is a very genuine man when you're with him and won't be afraid to challenge you. He challenged me to go win. I think he viewed that a lot of people thought I was going to lose, and he challenged me to go find the way to win. We did, but it was his challenge that was most impressive because I like people who actually expect the best of you. And I think that's what he did of me and of others. I think it raises the bar for everybody.
Your families are close. Tell us a little bit about that if you can.
Well, the families are close. We were from Waco, Texas, McLennan County. My dad was the party chairman in McLennan County, went to Washington, D.C. To serve in the Nixon administration, came back to Texas and was a part of not only the formation of the Department of Justice, but actually within the party structure. My dad became a federal judge. By then, President Bush was vice president and aiming for good days. My dad was a loyal lawyer, a loyal Republican, but a man who very much had an idea that he believed that what George Bush was doing was good for the nation. And my dad is one of those guys that wants to do the right thing and do the right thing for the country so that everybody benefited.
Did George H.W. Bush appoint him as FBI director, your father?
President Reagan did.
President Reagan did. Okay, he was vice president at that time.
He was vice president.
How did it hit you when you got the news late last night or early this morning?
Well, it's disappointing. Obviously, you know, my parents are growing older. I was with George W. a month ago, and he told me his dad is very, very secure in where he is in the world. As you know, he built a new legacy at 80 years old, and that was a relationship back with President Clinton. And that's not always easy. That identifies how strong he is of himself, that he could go back with someone who actually had, it was a bitter campaign, and go back and find commonality for the good of a lot of things. I think it speaks volumes about President Bush. But remember, the other part of President Bush's life is Barbara. And Barbara was always slightly ahead of President Bush, always slightly ahead. And I think that commonality of their strength came in his admiration of her. And everybody's admiration of Barbara was a good thing. And I think the president, after he lost Mrs. Bush, lost a lot too. I think if you listen to George W., his dad felt it.
It's been less than 8 months, and now he's passed.
Yeah.
When you spoke with his son, George W. Bush, about a month ago, did he get into any of this or hint at any of this is coming soon? It caught me by surprise, I should say, as much as it can for what he's been through. Did you have that feeling that this day was coming in such the immediate future?
I gathered that the final days were near. It's hard to always know. You know, death has its own course. Death is something that is many times a relationship between that individual and the running of the race and the Lord and your comfort where you are. And I think the president simply had reached his last breath and was very, very satisfied with his life and the results that he gave.
Two final questions for you. First, any anecdote, any great story that sticks out in your mind that you think is important to tell North Texans?
Well, I think that the story that would be told when he came to be with me in 2004, when I had a big election, he ran off the airplane down the ramp and was excited. He wanted me to know that it may be an old dog teaching a young dog new tricks, but that you always give it your best shot.
Well, he was a young 80 then, so fairly spry.
He was, but one could also say that he was of stature and a former president and would be cautious and careful. He was not the least bit cautious and careful. He was very dynamic. He was direct. He was thoughtful about and hopeful about what I would be doing to match his enthusiasm. And I had to, and I did. What are the final lessons or takeaways that we as a country should take from President George H.W. Bush? I think George H.W. Bush wanted to be seen as a Texan, believed in not only the people and the land, but believed in the ideas and ideals of Texas. He always took those everywhere he went. When he was an ambassador to China, he still wore a cowboy hat. He had his cowboy boots. But what he did is he believed that the spirit of Texas, of what we stood for, was great for the country. And wherever he would go, he was always a Bush from Texas. And he believed that, you know, Ronald Reagan and California, they needed what they stood for, but that Texas needed a special place in everybody's idea of our country. And it sold for a long time. You remember, this was about the time also that we had Dallas, the TV show on CBS that was all over the world, and it still plays today. The idea of Texas is more than a mindset. It is a reality of a great viewpoint that people have about freedom, but mostly a can-do spirit about achieving things. That is quintessential President number 41, George Bush.
Congressman, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.